Join in, come along, it's open to everybody. On Monday we're showing a documentary, Art and Craft, which is about Mark Landis, who is one of the most prolific art forgers in US history. That's part of our ongoing series. Next Wednesday we have an extremely big program coming up, which is about the rising tide of Islamic insurgency in Southeast Asia. It's kicking off on the basis of the siege of Marawi and Mindanao Island over the past few weeks, which now seems to be settling down. It's left over 200 people dead, but it could be the tip of the iceberg of what's going on in Southeast Asia. There's a feeling that there's already somewhere in the order of 1,200 Muslim insurgents in the Philippines alone with connections to Islamic State. There may be as many as 30 organizations operating in Southeast Asia with similar links. So it's a huge issue for everybody, and we have a very good panel coming to speak to us, including a security expert who traces his roots to Northern Ireland and the peace process there. He's very well informed. Then we're juggling programs at the moment, but on the 12th of next month we have a very interesting program on the history of Ayutthaya, and it's based on a new book that's being brought out by Chris Baker and Pasuk Pongpaichit, professor at Chulalongkorn University. They're very old members and supporters of the FCCT, and recently it was revealed that they are also this year's winners, the laureates of the Fukuoka Grand Prize, which is an extraordinary academic accolade, and it's for their body of work in Thailand going back decades, which covers the history, everything from the politics of Thaksin to the culture, the poetry. They're a very accomplished duo, and so they'll be in the club, and that's going to be a tremendous evening. One of the interesting things is that nobody has ever written a full history of Ayutthaya's 400-year span before, so this is actually a groundbreaking book. And so to this evening, we're extremely lucky to have in the club three very astute observers of the Thai economy and also of the Thai political situation. I think I'm going to invite you gentlemen to come up now. Kun Anutin, can I ask you to come and take your seat? Kun Prin. Kun Tom. I always feel a bit embarrassed introducing people who are very well known, but prevail with me. Kun Anutin Chanvirakun heads the Boom Chai Thai Party, which is a very important emerging third force in the Thai political scene, and we're waiting to see how the party rules and regulations pan out in the next 18 months, and we move towards an election late in 2018. Kun Anutin is firmly grounded in the business world as well, as chairman and president of the construction giant Sino-Thai Engineering and Construction, so he has a very, very intimate view of the infrastructure situation in Thailand. He holds numerous other directorships in listed companies and is an engineering graduate at Hofstra University in New York. Sitting next to him is Julpat Tom Krusapon. Did I get that right?
Not Joe Butt.
Who is quite a character and a long-standing advisor to numerous prime ministers. He became chief executive of Tune Insurance PCL in late 2014 and previously had a distinguished career in telecoms as Samsung country manager and managing director for Nortel networks in Thailand and Vietnam. He became president of the Samat Corporation, if you can believe this, in 1997 and was named Telecom Journal's Person of the Year in 2003. And he had lives before that. He was a political science graduate at California State University in Los Angeles, and at that time went on to handle President Bill Clinton's events and public appearances in Southern California, while he was serving as deputy spokesman for Mayor Richard Riordan in Los Angeles. Not least, he was the chief organizer of the Miss Universe pageant in Thailand in 2005.
That's the highlight of my life. Yeah.
We'll get to that later.
Can everybody smile? 1, 2, 3, there we go. So my mom will actually think that I reached the pinnacle now.
Be depressing if that was true, but anyway. And then finally we have Prayuth, who is the son of a very famous Thai politician and public servant, who I hope will come and talk to us one day, not too far off. Prin is the managing director of CLSA Thailand and has worked for that company as well in Hong Kong. He's been vice president of Tisco Bank and an investment banker in his early career at ABN AMRO in London. He's a graduate of the London School of Economics and became a governor of the Stock Exchange of Thailand in 2006. His business card is very impressive. It says governor.
Director.
That says governor. And he's also a director of the Association of Thai Securities Companies and was vice chairman of the ASEAN UK Business Forum. Kun Anutin, I think it would be good if you would kick off and give us a rundown. We're here to discuss the coup dividend, what has happened in Thailand on the business front in the last 3 years, and we're very, very interested to hear what you believe has gone well and what has gone less well.
Thanks, Dominic, and good evening to all. Dominic has given me a very difficult framework to begin with, but I would pardon myself by saying that I was taught not to look back and only look forward. What has happened to Thailand? It depends on which side we are standing. Many people said it was good, that it has stopped a certain degrees of aggressions, while other people might have said that this was an undemocratic act. So if I were to summarize, I said, we still prevail and we're still walking ahead. So for me, as a political party leader, I'm only planning for what Thailand would turn out after the election. One thing about Thailand, which is very unique in a way, is that the real sector, namely the business enterprises, people who are working on a day-to-day basis, who has adopted themselves to the change of the change of the world, would not really matter in terms of the regime that is conducted in Thailand now. Because what? Because the uniqueness was the real sector and the administration in public sectors, we tend to walk on parallel track. In many instances, like during Kun Anand's administration, when he was a prime minister, we saw a high single-digit growth, despite his government coming in through a military taking over action. And this is the same nowadays. I tend not to go deep into details because we are not scholars. We are practitioners. We have to live in the real world. If you talk about Thailand being so disrupted and it's going down, people say economy is taking a plunge, big plunge. I have to the right answer to it, again, it depends on who says. You ask a contractor or construction companies today, which my father founded one company, but I have nothing to do with it. I'm only a shareholder. But if you ask me as a shareholder, I'm very happy because it pocket 3 times backlog comparing with the things last year. You ask the bank, their profitability has shot, highest ever. Numbers of NPL decline significantly. Most importantly, the market capitalization of the listed companies in Thailand have grown. The SET index have risen. So if you live in the real world, if I were to invest in Thailand coming from overseas, these factors would be enough for me to dare coming into Thailand and try to put some money in or even create our own business. And I have been taught to look at things on optimistic side first. I told myself every time, during the peak of Thailand, during, let's say, under General Chan-ocha's ruling in the 90s, Thailand had experienced double-digit growth, but there were still many poor. There were still many people who failed in business. It goes the same till now. If you are still in the business, let's say if you are making a pager, the thing that used to be, next to our vest, I don't think you can sustain. If you change if you develop your business, the products according to the change of the world, you will always prevail. Nowadays, who is using Nokia no more? It's too late for them to change. The company like Nokia used to be the company that I had always asked myself, why a company from Scandinavia could become so successful? When will it be, slowing down? I could only foresee at that time big growth. I think nobody in that company eats apple no more. Within a few years, their business sliced down. Same thing as Thailand. When I ran the business, if I only focus on petrochem, which was my company's core business at that time, petrochemical, oil refineries, I would not be able to lead the company to a certain extent that it has grown so fast. Up till one day I had to come in to play in the infrastructural development. But I only believe that this is a developing country, so there are still lots of things to develop. And we should go on the sector that is emerging. And fortunately, my guess was right. So today, I don't do any more oil refinery. It's now in the hand of a much smaller company to do that. Once you develop yourself with the trend, nothing can stop you from growing. Same as Thailand today. We are under junta regime. Okay, if you did not go out to the street and yell and humiliate the junta and don't carry the rockets or weapons and keep irritating the leaders, we can still live happily. If people choose to go for doing a day-to-day business as usual, they can always live happily. There is no way that the junta could come in and say, you know, I don't like you taking Caesar salads. And stop doing that. I order you under Article 44 to only eat, you know, carrots. So it depends on how we position ourselves. Personally, I only believe that Thailand will have to hold election within the end of next year. And this is my firm belief. So I will just behave myself and plan for my party to make sure that once election period comes, I'm at the forefront to campaign for my political, campaign all the policies that I could sell to the people under the law. So to me, I would say a come what may basis, because this is not the country. The country is not the thing that I have to make profit or I have to fear loss. All I need to do is, as a whole, if I could benefit, first the country, second its people, I think that is enough agenda for me to worry about Thailand. So let me finish at this time, and all I can say is be confident in Thailand. You know, election must come. If not, somebody will have to pay high price for not bringing election into Thailand. That's all I can say. And I believe in what Thailand is in the eyes of Thai. I know how to live in Thailand happily. And I believe everyone who is normal, who is normal, knows how to live happily. And that is the thing that we can bring Thailand forward. That's enough.
Okay, well, we'll come back to you for
We
sure.
will be able to go out.
No. Kuntom, the coup dividend,
Yes.
what have we seen in the last 3 years?
First, thank you very much. It's an honor to be here. The last time I was here was, geez, with Governor Sukumpan. Way back then. That's how long it's been. But it's an honor not only to be here, but to sit next to Thailand's potential prime minister at some point, I think. I didn't say next. I say at some point. Okay. And certainly,
You're wrong.
I'm wrong. You know, potential future minister of finance, right? At some point. I'm just going to be their driver, I think. That's about my potential. The coup dividend. Okay, so look, I'm not an economist, but I do like to spend money. Thank God I have a wife who keeps me from spending a lot of money. Yeah, the dividend. Let's go to the positives first. I'll tell you what the positive of the dividend is. I used to have an office here at Mercury View, and I just got tired of stepping over people trying to get to Air One. Right? I think we can all remember, from the yellows to the red to the purple to the pink to the green to the blue, this whole color-coded thing got me confused. Right? And I just got tired of stepping over people. Right? And I think that's a dividend. Right? No one dares to park a van or something in the middle of Sukhumvit anymore and think that they can sit here and have a garden party without having the consequences. That is a true dividend. No one's going to do that, right? No one's going to rush our airport anymore, Democrats anyway. They're not going to do that, right? That is a real dividend. I think there has been a stability issue that we haven't seen in a while. Obviously, the coup has been 10 years, 11 years in the making. I think the country's pretty stable. At least we know who's in control. And we also know that if you get out of that control, as Kuna Nutin so said, if you break those rules, there's actually somebody to slap you on the hand. Now, a lot of people may say, well, we always had that. The people who are currently in power now didn't slap the hands of the people at that time. Well, obviously, because they didn't have the power. Now they do. So I think that's a stability. Corruption, I think corruption's down. Right? I'll be honest with you. I used to pay 30%. Right? You get a project, automatic. It's 30%. Now it's down to about 15%. That's pretty good. Don't lie, guys. That's 15% more in my pocket. That's 15% more that's going to make better roads. That's 15% more that's going to do better things. Right? And the other good thing, I'll tell you, corruption is down, and once you pay, it actually gets done. Right? I used to pay 30%, new government comes in, I pay another 30%. That actually pisses me off, right? Look, don't tell me there's no corruption in any other country, Trump hotels, right? So come on, right? So let's be fair, right? I think that's better. I think the influence of the dark forces in Thailand has gone down. I think you used to have mafia in everything, from taxi cabs to what? Well, I'm not, look, guys, nothing is perfect. Yes, there are still these influences. But if you go to Pattaya now, I can actually see the sand. If I go to Phuket, I actually can lay down my blanket without some guy coming to me and saying, give me 100 baht for that piece of sand. These are real dividends, right? If you know, I work a lot with Minister Gopgan of Tourism. At the beginning, I had real issues with this whole street food cleaning thing, right? But then, you know, I kind of like having a sidewalk now, right? I enjoy having a sidewalk that I can walk without having to worry about walking off the street and getting hit by a motorcycle taxi. These may sound trivial, but these are realities. There's been an issue of organization. And nobody does organization better than the Army, do they? Right? These are real positives, okay? We had a really good transition. Remember, I'm sure this whole foreign press was probably very concerned on how we're going to go from number 9 to number 10. Nothing happened, did it? Nothing happened, except for the fact that it was a very good, very smooth transition. That's a coup dividend, okay? These are the good things, right? But what do I really think about this coup? Yeah, if you check me out, right, I work with Kun Thaksin, I work with a number of people. I always say the same thing. I thought it was just wasted. I think the coup's wasted. I don't think they've gone far enough. You have Article 44, right? Donald Trump would trade Melania for that thing. Come on. Could you imagine if Donald Trump had Article 44? Jeff Sessions, Comey, see you later. You have it. You had the goodwill of the people. It's always interesting to me that people say Prayuth is a dictator. What kind of dictator needs to explain a submarine buy? What kind of dictator needs to explain that he's going to go out and buy, what did he buy today? A new toy, right? Bought a Chinese tanks, right? Maybe he forgot the bullets again, but he bought a tank. A real dictator doesn't explain these. A real dictator doesn't need to have to worry about building a coal power plant and then having a bunch of people come up and then say, we're not going to build it anymore, right? I'm glad to see that he finally dropped the hammer and is going to build, I think, this high-speed railway now to the Eastern Economic Seaboard, right? You know something? That's what he should have done more. I think he had the power, he had the goodwill, but he chickened out. And that saddens me. I mean, if you're going to have a coup, you know, let's have one. Let's have one. Let's do it. Let's put some of these people really in jail, right? How is he going to explain in 16 months that Yingluck is still not in jail? What the hell was that all about? You have this coup with the, basically because Yingluck was corrupted, and she's still not in jail. And I'm a Yingluck supporter. And I'm saying this because I'm telling you, if you're going to have one, and you come out as this tough, strong man, Putin-like, and you end up being, you know, basically what he's doing now, I think it's been a wasted coup. Right? Obviously, he's done some things, right? He's put a few people in jail. right? He confiscated Jonathan's passport. You get it back yet? You get your passport back yet?
I did.
You did?
See, he's not even.
You got, hey, let's give a hand to Jonathan. He gets his passport back, right?
I'm not here, right?
I do think it's sad. The other thing that I think is sad about this whole coup, right, is the fact that they weren't able to PR it correctly. It was just bad PR. Instead of telling the world that now you have stability, they didn't do that, right? But is it anything, right? Trump has bad PR, Prayuth has horrible PR, right? They didn't PR this thing correctly. It brought back stability, right? Things are being cleaned up. Business policies, as Kun Anutin says, I agree, nothing has changed, right? Don't be fooled by the negative of this country. The banks, and I'll ask you, and you can ask any banker, are the banks in Thailand flush with cash? Yes, right? We're building yellow lines, pink lines. How many lines? How many color lines? We're building trains. There is enough money flow in this country. I used to own 10% of AirAsia and AirAsia X. I sold it last year. And I'll tell you right now, our planes are full. AirAsia is currently at 86% capacity. AirAsia X, which is our long-haul flight to Korea and Japan and China and Shanghai, is at 78%. Now, for a low-cost long-haul carrier, that's a darn good number. Tourism has not taken a hit at all. If you follow the trend correctly, only about 5% of China travelers are actually traveling. When they really start to travel, where are they going to go? They're going to come here. Right? Why do they want to come to Thailand? Because we're open 24 hours. We don't have religious problems. Our army's kind of cool. We let you party as much as you want. So again, I think they did bad PR. Instead of saying things, you know, to help promote tourism, to help promote export, to help promote this, they focus on trivial things, right? Trying to, you know, they should have gotten off Thaksin immediately. Right? Trying to catch Thaksin is a waste of energy, waste of time, waste of breath. Right? This government should have moved forward. So where are we now? So with all that said and done, you know, I'm a strong believer, and I talk to Kunutin about this all the time. And a lot of you may say no, but yes, we are going to have elections. I will plant a flag here, and if we don't have elections, I'll come back here again in 18 months, and you can shave my head. Okay? I'll give you that. For a very simple reason. The payoff for Prayuth, the dividend, the final coup dividend, is to have elections where at the end of the day, you have control. Don't be fooled. We will have elections because that's the final payoff of the coup dividend. If he doesn't have it, as Kun Anutin said, somebody will pay. And it will probably be him. Having one, it gives the final payoff to the dividend, which is what? To make Thailand, instead of the American democracy that we all so love, which I'm a little confused with anyway. Well, I used to work for Trump for 2 years. Miss Universe, okay? So Trump was the owner of Miss Universe when I walked there, and I'll tell you something. He knew how to pick women. Okay. We're not going to get into any women thing here, though. Okay. But I worked for Trump for 2 years. So again, I think you have to really look at this, and we'll come back to more questions. The final dividend will be the elections, because where does Prayuth go? Doesn't go anywhere, right? But he'll have professionals now running the country and running the economy, and I think that's where you're going to see real growth in Thailand because of all the pent-up demand for spending, for investments. And you have better people doing PR for our country, right? That's about it for me, and so I'll turn it next to our future finance minister.
Don't curse me too quickly.
Don't curse. Yeah, by the way, if you guys, that's in Thailand, right? Immediately I say he's a finance minister, he ends up being the cultural minister.
So, what's your take on Kun Prince, right?
Thank you. So thank you for the honor for the FCCT, and it's the honor to sharing the stage with these two fine gentlemen. And I'm glad that we already have partly a successful event, because at least this event was allowed to be hosted when I spoke to a few of my friends who are Rotarians. And this is the Rotarians at the Bangkok South. Many of you know the Rotarians of the Bangkok South don't really organize such a intellectual event so much as getting drinks in the bar and pubs and getting wasted. They've been quite scared that these events may not be authorized or whatnot, but I'm glad at least that we got that part out of the way. And the content that I want to address, and the coup dividend is an interesting topic on its own, because the word dividend for me as a banker or as an investor and often means that you're getting something in returns. And a dividend, as Mark Bowers knows, is something you usually get paid once a year, or sometimes some firm may pay quarterly dividends. So usually you judge a performance over a year, over 2 years, and the sustainability of the ability to pay that dividend year in, year out, and the ability to increase it is usually being judged over the longer term performance, 3 to 5 years upwards. Of course, with Thai politics and with the nature of how things work in Thailand, you often judge the incoming governments, politicians, military, with the people who work in running the country, usually within months, let alone 1 year or 3 years. We have the luxury of seeing a 3 years, so at least part of it can be judged and analyzed upon. There is one famous English phrase that I want to draw upon before I make a detailed analysis. You know that there's a phrase saying that God has given me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to go ahead and change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. I think that's very key here for Thailand, because when General Prayuth was, you can argue, debate whether forced to enter into a coup, he knew straight away what was going to be up against him. The challenges that he, in running the country, is something that is trickier than anyone can imagine. You know, newspaper can write all days about successes and failure in the first few months and so on and so forth. I would want to go into the failure first, to go on the contrary of Kun Tom. Kun Tom went through the success and then come to the failures. I want to list some of probably the pitfalls. I agree with Kun Tom that partly some parts of the coup, element of the coups, did not go as far as it could have been. He always promised reform. I think the first key things to reform is the actual government itself, or the civil servants and the SOE, state-owned enterprise. Every one of you, I'm sure, have encountered countless labyrinths of bureaucracy, problems, issues when you deal with ministries in Thailand. And that leads to ease of business, and I'll come to that later. But within different ministries, different civil servants, the way they do things, we often talk about Thailand 4.0, the S-curve, digital economies. All these are marketing jargons. They're not economic terms, they're not in your economic textbook. I happen to study economics at the London School of Economy. So I was a little bit alarmed when the word S-curve is being used. An S-curve is typically used to describe a cycle of an economy and how things are progressing or growth. It's definitely not one where you would use to associate with a government long-term strategic 20 years plan, or how you go about choosing industries to pick to be your value-add industry or services industry. So for me, personally, when Thailand 4.0 was being mentioned, I thought, wait a minute, on average, most people probably thought Thailand's are on 0.4 rather than 4.0. And perhaps it's -4 for some of you thinking, not even 4.0. So the challenge is real, but when the government say we want to do this, I thought, wow, okay, they're brave. But when they tackle when they actually go down to the details of how to do things, it doesn't, not so much digital, because a lot of the ways of doing business is still very, very slow. And the key thing is on the rules of law. The rules of law in Thailand are there too often to punish, to regulate, rather than to be there as a tool to develop. And this is key different. I was in London with the Board of Stock Exchange of Thailand recently, and the fintech community there in London, in England, I give them full credits. I mean, there are many things that may be wrong with the UK politics, but at least you've got the thing so right in terms of liberalism, in terms of doing the rule of law to develop the financial sector. And no matter if Brexit or not, you know, UK, England, London will still stay the financial heart of Europe for this very reason, because the regulations is so vibrant and so open and more liberal. Whereas in Thailand, the Security Exchange Commission, or even they say they want to give fintech license, or even crowdfunding platform license. Guess how many has been given so far? Have a guess. Next to 0. I think 1 was given. Bank of Thailand want to give sandbox license, regulation sandbox. Guess how many licenses was given so far? 1 to K-Bank. This is after 3 years of talking about value add services and whatnot. If you want to start a business in Thailand on the fintech, there are certain regulations, the capitals you have to put up with, the e-payment system. Some of them, when they contradict with the big bank, the commercial banks, often they run into this straight away, and who is there to help them? At the moment, the rule of law with the BOT, Bank of Thailand, the SEC, even with the Ministry of Finance, does not promote the interests of the startups or the small guys that the government claims to promote. Look at the profit of the commercial banks. Siam Commercial Bank, 50 billion baht profit a year. Our good friend Pinum Atit doesn't need to do anything. He could just sit at the beach the whole year. The profitability would not take a single knock. The cartels at the Thai Bankers Association has been created in the first place because of the Asian financial crisis in 1997 to at least recapitalize and strengthen the Thai banks and to revitalize the economy. That's fine back then. But now that the Thai banks are so strong, it is time to think seriously how you liberalize the financial regulations. And before you're doing that, the whole within the regulators themselves need to reform themselves. I'm talking about the Bank of Thailand, the Security Exchange Commission. I'm talking about the Ministry of Finance. The KPI, the key goals within those ministries are still so far off the target. I know the government has talked about reform a lot, and I'll come to perhaps the good point later, but the big challenge heads on that the government, like Kun Prayuth, where he has Article 44 and whatnot, to do this kind of reform where no elected government can do, is for me personally to tackle the civil servant reform heads on, and that for me has not happened. The digital economy in India, I give you an example. A company called Bajaj Finance is a fintech in India. Guess how fast they can approve personal loan? When you go online and go to Bajaj Finance, have a guess. For the right answer, I'll give you 1 roast duck for my 4-season restaurant, roast duck. So have a guess how long. In Thailand, it's 1 or 2 days. You know, good banks can do 2 days, 3 days. Have a guess how quick Bajaj Finance can approve the loan.
10 minutes.
10 minutes? 1 hour? Immediate? Huh? 5 minutes. Who said that? He's spot on. 5 minutes. More 4.5. Roast duck. Chitlom branch next door. 1 roast duck. I'm going to give the name later. So,
by the way, Kun Prin is a very generous guy. You can bring 50 friends.
That's one recommendation that he failed to introduce me as on my 4-season restaurant. I'm a shareholder, so I don't manage the restaurant, but I'm a So sorry. Bajaj Finance, with the fintech, the Indian bureaucracy is well known. How can the Indian government can embark upon the e-government and the national identification? It's all in the blockchain and being put in such a system. Thai government need to prioritize this. If they are serious about having a digital economy, the first thing they need to tackle heads on is the reform within their own backyard. That's the first point. The second point, I thought that the key issues of reform for me is that the government knows that the ease of doing business is key to any successful strategic initiative that you want to draw in FDI. You want to draw in foreign direct investment. It has been weak for 2.5 years. There is a reason why. Even though the government from day one, they've allowed business factories approval, raw dossier, and how to open factories supposed to be quicker. But how come the FDI has been lacking for the last 2.5 years? Okay, fine, Vietnam, Indonesia, they have their own big markets themselves to go to. That's fine. But Thailand is still a strategic geographical advantage. There's still vibrant rules of law here relative to Indonesia or Vietnam, I would argue, despite all the problems that I mentioned in my first point. The logistics, the roads, the rail, still better. I mean, yes, infrastructure is still better relative. So where's all the FDI gone? A lot of companies still cannot easily enter Thailand. I mentioned crowdfunding. You need to have a local majority owner to set up a fintech crowdfunding in Thailand. The actual rules has not been changed at the Ministry of Commerce to allow foreign investor to enter a sector that they want to promote. And this is a technological sector, internet. There's no boundary, and there should not be protectionism in this sector. There is no national security interest. Okay, perhaps there's some gateway in internet and whatever, but whatever is posted on Facebook and posted on Google or on Instagram is being posted. I think a lot of criticism both positive and negative is posted. So for me personally, the government should look at how seriously to tackle this rule of law that allowed foreign technological platform to enter Thailand, allow a bigger majority ownership. Then you get a speedier growth within the internet digital economy sector they want. The protectionism in the professionalism is real. You saw how the Article 44 was used to speed up the Thai-China railway project and the enter of the education by foreign university to the EEC area. Cry foul the Thai private sector. The Thai Architect Association, the Thai Engineer Association is already getting ready to protest in that Thai engineer and architect would lose jobs to Chinese. I mean, come on, give me a break. How would you envisage my company, parent company, CITIC, C-I-T-I-C, CITIC from China, happened to be the parent company of CLSA. And I was in Beijing just on Monday. When we talk about them coming to do business in Thailand, they're already talking about finding a local partner, joint ventures. I told Kun Anutin that the Chinese partner are interested in co-investing with Sinothai. Of course, Sinothai doesn't need to raise capital, doesn't need money, so he politely declined. But, in terms of finding the Chinese interest, they're not there to just do M&A or to just run everything themselves. Of course they will work with Thai engineers, of course they'll work with Thai architects. But the professionalism that we need to bring from abroad to technology transfer, we need some foreign, good quality foreigners. Just like journalists, it's free. We have all you guys here. Look at my industry in brokers. So many foreign brokers. Look at Mark Bowers. We allow him to live in Thailand for so many years, practicing, with a brokerage and investment banking community. How come we don't allow that in other sectors that we need this kind of good people? In doctors, we lack doctors in countryside. Doctors is one of the most protectionist area. We want to be a healthcare hub, and yet foreign doctors need to take Thai exams to be qualified. Of course, there are ways to circumvent that, I know that, and I'm sure PASAPA or the Doctors Association would find ways to explain why you must be pass the Thai exam to communicate with your patient or whatever. But actually, there are translators, there are good LAM, there are good communicators who can do this. And countryside, you need good doctors. Good Thai doctors stay in urban for good pay and good life. They won't go to the countryside. So there must be ways that we can think around this kind of protectionism. AEC, ASEAN Economic Community. Thailand is strategic geographically and have the passion and have the vision from the private sector, may I say, to grow within the region, to be a leader in the region. We can be bigger than Singapore. In fact, as a stock exchange, we are already bigger than Singapore. We trade more on the volume average daily turnover than Singapore. So if we are serious about opening up and be competitive, I mean, the World Economic Forum rankings on competitiveness, anti-corruption, as Kun Tom mentioned correctly, is already moving in the right direction. So this government somehow has already balanced something right on the anti-corruption, on the competitiveness. They're moving perhaps in the right direction. But in terms of actually freeing up, liberalizing some of the sectors, helping the smaller guys, I would debate that some of the bigger guys have actually got stronger muscles now. I don't want to mention names, but you can guess who are the big conglomerates in Thailand. Oop. I mean, I still, okay, that's good. You can guess, so thank you for being so honest. But
I'm still confused about your comment about Mark Bowers, though.
Well, we allow him to be in Thailand and operates in the brokerage community for so long. But you see, this kind of thing that I think that there are issues with. Lastly, on the difficult side, the quick handout, the quick wins. This is not an elected government. They do not need quick wins. They do not need to please the farmers. I know politicians do. Kun Anutin will be able to please, Thai will have, subsidies, have whatever to please the farmers. This government doesn't need to do much populism policy. They've done some policy which have raised the eyebrows among some of the bankers, investors, that these are just populists in a different guise. As you know, some money has been wasted. Okay, perhaps they want to make the relatively less well-off people happy. I understand that. He wants to play a good politics as well as doing a longer-term strategic vision. So that's his challenge. He wants to balance those two things. But my hope is that he doesn't get too much involved in the marketing, the priming, the populism that sometimes his economics teams often talk about. So that for me is a trickiness and a difficulty. And lastly, on political point, which I won't even go into, which is a difficult one, is that the divisiveness within the feeling of the people, that they feel that they've been let down somehow with every time military intervention. There seems to be the feeling of divisiveness. People who feel like they're on one side, they still stay on one side. They don't feel a genuine kind of bringing together in terms of the genuine reconciliation. but I won't go much into details there yet. I'll let the political expert explain that point. On the good side, just to be a quick one, I think on the slightly more positive side, I mentioned about the slight failure of the start of the digital economy. For me personally, I'm not a big fan of Thailand 4.0 or digital economy. I think the strength of this country is on our cultural economy. As Kun Tom mentioned correctly, Ministry of Tourism has been fantastic. Kun Kop Kan has been fantastic in highlighting the local community-based tourism, in actually showing that tourism is not just for tourists. Tourism is there as a tool to promote, to engineer a revitalization in a local identity, improve the livelihood and betterment of the local incomes. It's not there for tourists. You got to improve and develop the local community to know how to protect their national resources and improve the community bonds and promote the local community-based angle. So the Ministry of Tourism has been a big win on that part. I felt the less digital side of the economy, the empathy. People talk about inequality. Everywhere in the world you see it. His Majesty the King Rama IX has talked about sufficiency economy. One thing about sufficiency economy, it's not just about knowing not to overspend or go overbound or go overboard. It's actually about feeling the pains or the joy of persons, people, community who live next to you. When the corporates knows the pains point that they actually going into in a community and they're actually hurting some of the locals who are living there, the feeling of empathy and the feeling of actually, this is something that Thai people genuinely have within their blood and DNA. And I felt that at least this government has brought some angle, whether through Pracharat or through varieties of policy that they're doing. They genuinely want to bridge this inequality. It is not going to be an easy job because people always say, oh, you take one pocket here, you go to another pocket there, or you transfer wealth this way and that way. But I felt at least like some of the key policy, whether it's on the property tax, long overdue, whether it's on looking at the angles, how they can actually get the big corporates to go and actually spend, invest on education. I felt a genuine reform or the ability for them to go into this area on the empathy front is actually genuinely real. The second thing, infrastructure spending has been sped up, has been speed up big time. Look at elected government, the track records, very slow in approvals. This government has approved, by the way, one bidding on the Green Line, December in 2014. In 2015, you already saw both the double tracks, Sino-Thai won the pink and yellow line in consortium with BTS and Rajbury. 2 double tracks has been awarded, 5 more to come this year. How many governments can see such a track record of so much approvals of biddings and winners being announced and signed of all the mega projects? I don't think any elected government can claim the track record on infrastructure and disbursement as good as this government. So sure, they have Article 44, but sometimes that's what is there to be helped and speed up those infrastructure investments that we definitely badly need. Perhaps I'll leave it there.
Good. Okay. Well, that's great. There's so much there to pick from. We have a microphone there, and guess who's popped up?
No.
Can you identify yourself?
Can you identify yourself? Yes.
Thank you. That's better.
Start singing, Jonathan. Mass singer.
Jonathan Head, BBC. That's all you needed to hear, wasn't it? My first question, I've actually got 2, which I don't normally do, and it's a little bit naughty, but Kunanutin, one of the themes of this military government and the people supporting it in the NLA has been that politicians are bad, that politics was always bad for the people, and that the nexus of business and politics is always corrupt. Do you, I mean, you're a businessman and you're a politician. Do you see politics being really different in the way it's practiced when we finally have an election again? My second question to all 3 of you is there's been a lot of criticism of the bureaucrats for slowing everything up, you know, and not allowing change. I mean, that's been a theme. But we all know how Thailand works. You've got very big businesses with cozy relationships with the very top levels, and we mean the military, the bureaucracy, and the palace. Those relationships have run the country for decades. Surely it's not the bureaucrats who stop change, it's that top relationship at the top. But Kunanutin, perhaps you could tell me a little bit about how politics is going to be first.
The answer to your first question, well, you know, in every sector there are always good and bad people. our late beloved King Ramanai have said that. His remark was very significant, and if Thai people still remember that, we would really ignore what the politicians are posted by the military leader. His Majesty King Ramanai once said, in any society there are good and bad people simultaneously. The task of the leader or the ruler is to make sure that we use the good people to do good for the country, and we must try to prohibit the bad people to share that power. So, well, I make believe that not all politicians are bad as we were accused. And then, again, I am always optimistic and look on the way forward. When people said something bad about my career or my, even personally or you know, as a whole, as long as I know that I'm not part of that, so I would really neglect that accusations. And our behavior or our belief will prove that, whether we were accused rightly or wrongly. Again, if you would notice, there hasn't been any big movement from political players. Especially, I don't see any big rally or any attempt to rally in the past 6 months. I believe because of the what Kun Prin just mentioned, divisiveness, politicians have reached another transition in not coming out and try to demand for election, nor try to stir the country's situation right now. Fortunately, we had a very sad event that, you know, stunned all the Thai people's aggression. The passing of our late king really made Thai people calm down significantly. I personally feel that Thai become more united after our King Bhumibol has passed. And with all the worries that, you know, we used to have, not only for foreigners, but also people in the country, we have seen a very smooth transition of the throne, which when I went on roadshow with Kun Prin several times, rather than those investors asking me about my corporate or the facts and figures of the stock of my company, they kept asking about transition. My response to them was, I had full confidence that the transition of Thailand would be so smooth until you guys, or even ourselves, would blame our, would, you know, would tell ourselves that why did we waste our time thinking about this nonsense? And it did happen. Which means what? It limits the space for the anti-monarchy to continue rallying that, you know, monarchical time is no longer suitable for any country. The Thai, all Thais need monarchy. And you would see that the transition was almost, we didn't even have to talk about candidates or nominees. It's very blunt, very vivid, very clear. And we are longing for that. So the situation in Thailand now, who stabilized the movement of the country. When I'm touching something high, I have to think the right word to talk, so pardon me. I believe vast majority of Thai people, they have to pay respect that the royal cremation of our late king is falling due. Anyone coming out on the street trying to do something stupid, trying to do something to stir the calmness of the country right now would be deemed nothing else but, you know, not really a traitor, but it's like it's wrong time, wrong move. I don't know a specific word of that. You imagine on the few days after October 13th of last year, there were no crimes in Thailand. no pickpocket, no burglars, no nothing. So I think the passing of our late king did, you know, despite griefs and sadness that we all hail, did send us some message that we need to be united. Now we have two ceremonies that we have to undergo. After the royal cremation, then it comes coronation, royal coronation. That will, you know, that will prolong, even though these two important historical ceremonies of Thailand will take a while to complete. You will see politicians let it go. I myself, maybe if I talk in the political arena, then they might not like me saying, I won't make any plan until those two historical events have completed. Because I think, and again, I live in, I do things based on reality and realistic thinking. I know that how many policies that my party would render to the people. It doesn't, I don't need 9 months to prepare for that. I only need probably weeks, and, you know, by coincidence, the new charter, we don't have to go Hyde Park anymore. All the parties, all the political parties would do to campaign itself is just to make sure that you have enough leaflet and comes up with a policy that doesn't sound like you are promoting the populism policy. Which, okay, populism means you're giving money to a certain group of people, but not all. So to me, I think as an engineer, I said, then we don't give money. We don't give fish, but we give baits. No, we give the hook, we give the canes, you know. For example, in business arena, people always complain about government bureaucracy, slowness, incorporation from civil servants. And before approval, they will have to, any approval will be based on the discretion of Director General or Secretary General or the ministers. How could I fix that? Then with a checklist, for example. Once I use the word checklist, from now on, no discretion. It has to go on checklist. We have to come up with if you want to build a building, what the checklist needs to be. You can't afford waiting for the EIA people, which convene, you know, once in 6 weeks and only 1.5 hours duration to approve. If you want to build a condominium, checklist means if you can make sure that, okay, you have engineers approval, you use the right construction materials, you know how to handle environments, you have enough capital. Tomorrow you go do piling, but make sure you stay within that boundary. So it will eradicate immediately the discretion from each level. All you need to do is to make sure that you have to comply with what you have promised. It's like ISO system that were very popular in the past 20 years. ISO 9000, ISO 14000, everybody thought that it was a Bible that you have to follow. In fact, it's not. It's the thing that you want to do, you want to produce, and you make your own Bible and you follow it strictly. Then you are given that ISO. That is your own standard. Nobody can tell you which standard is right except yourself. So this is the same thing. You want to apply for a license. You make sure that you vow yourself that you have been through driving school. You tick, 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 they have to issue the license. If something went wrong, they trace it back and you falsify the information. Well, you are given hell, you know. So these are the things that the future government, the future political parties will campaign for. We can't give anymore because it will be, no matter what it is, it will be deemed populism. You're giving aids to the farmers, you're giving even you reduce income tax. It's populism. So you are so bounded by the new constitution. And apart from that, you have another body. It's called, but I don't give a damn to that. So I don't know what it's called, but there will be another body to overlook the way the government is conducting. And they have a right to veto. But if we are confident that we are giving the right thing to the people, nothing can stop us doing that. If they want to stop us, we tell, hey, the people, you talk to the people. If people claim with us, you talk to that body. We have already delivered what we are supposed to do. So, again, Thailand can only leap forward if people use realistic strategies to govern, not by what it said, not by how Lee Iacocca revitalized Chrysler. We are on our own. So you just make sure that what suits for Thailand. What is the problem of Thailand? I am former contractor. I run one of the major construction companies in Thailand before I entered politics. All I know is every time the government came up with a budget spending, you know, unless there is a setup, you know, I could know that this project was won based on corrosion on bid, or this project really came in with big competition. You would see that all government spendings, if the bid was thrown out fairly, the winner would come in at 79% of the budget, 85, 80. If it wasn't done fairly, everyone would come in 99.9865 of the budget. You don't have to hire investigators or, you know, police or, you know, whatever agency to study whether it's corrupted or not corrupted. Just look at the budget. Then, well, basically, if we were to campaign, I would say my party will, whenever the budget bureau presented me with spendings on infrastructural improvements, without any calculator in my hand, I said, Director, take it out at least 10%, at least. And he would give us a big shock. And I said, I take care of that problem. Just cut it out. Actually, I don't have to ask him to cut. If I were in the, you know, authorized titles, I could cut it by myself. To cut is more, it's a lot easier than to spend, to increase. So these are the things that under the new constitutions, you are not allowed to give, but you are allowed to think of something that will, you know, save money to the country and use that money rather than giving to each section, make it as a whole and distribute to each sector. So to answer Jonathan's questions, it's very vague. I just say, I have my job to do. I know what I'm going to do as a politician, as a political leader, way forward. Post-election, post-NCPO. I just, how you call, as Frank Sinatra said, we do it our way because the past will no longer have any effect on the future. So no, call me bad, call me good, whatsoever. We already have something in our hand to move way forward, as well as other political parties. I believe that they must have come with something to be in line with what the charter allows to do.
Right. Did you want to?
There was a point about blaming bureaucrats, but that was a very comprehensive.
So it's answered. Right. So if there are other people.
Let me add something.
Yeah.
To your first question, I actually was sitting with a person yesterday who may or may not lead Kun Thaksin's party. Okay. And we sat till 2 in the morning. And I actually saw the dividend of the coup paid off in sitting with her for 2 hours in regards to politicians, which I thought was very interesting. And the first thing she said to me is, we have to find better people. We have to find better quality of people to be in our party. Right? She told me 2 things, right? One is, most of the major big ones are dead, or dying, or old, which is good, I guess. That's a dividend. We've been in this cycle for so long that your so-called bad, really bad politicians are getting way too old to do anything again. But the reality is you have to read the new Constitution. The new Constitution is a dividend of this coup. A lot of people may say it's bad, a lot of people may say it's dictatorial, blah, 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 blah. but it is a rule. It does give politicians a clear set of rules. Right? The other thing is, where you used to have a big politician win a district, and if you came in second, it meant you failed. Thai word is sop tok, right? This new constitution doesn't do that, right? You can actually come in second, and that has meaning, which allows political parties now to probably feel people that they don't need to actually win that district. They actually need a person who's going to gain a lot of votes and hopefully service that district. But the ideas of having, the Thai word is Jiao Paul. What's the English word for that, Jiao Paul? Huh?
Godfather.
Godfather.
Or mafia.
Capo, mafia. Right.
Italian word.
He looks Italian to me. He's kind of like, Italian, yeah. He look like Michael Corleone looking at me there. But if you really read the Constitution, that is going to change the way political parties pick their candidates. Where they had to pick a Carpo, is that a Carpo mafia guy, to run in that district, they no longer have to. They can bring in somebody who they feel could be better for their party, a younger generation, somebody who's going to gain the votes, because that second vote isn't wasted anymore. Right? So that's a good thing as a coup dividend for politicians, right? I would imagine a person like Kun Brin, it was under the old system, would have a very difficult time thinking of ever servicing the country because he knows of all the mess that could actually be in. And if he failed to win an election, Kun Brin would actually be tagged a failure. Now he doesn't. He can run, and if he gains 100,000 votes, he's going to get an MPC. It brings in better quality of people, right? So that's a good thing about this dividend. You have to really look at this Constitution, right? I always say this. If a lot of people bitch and complain about something, there's probably something good about it, right? So again, I found the conversation I had last night very interesting, which was we have to get better quality people to start running under the party's banner. So I thought that was interesting. In regard to your question about the multi-conglomerates, the CPs, the Chang, the big boys of this world, there's no difference, man. The US has the same thing, Europe has the same thing. Business is business, and business will protect their interests, right? Mark Zuckerberg will protect Facebook to the hilt, right? As Kuntanian will protect CP to the hilt, right? The bureaucrats in Thailand are bureaucrats. That's why they're bureaucrats, right? And bureaucrats in the US is the same thing. We will do when we're ordered to do something, right? I think the problem with the bureaucrats in Thailand is they haven't been cleared on who's doing the ordering. And they always know that this guy isn't going to be here for a long time. So they're gonna wait, right? It's not that they're not doing their job, it's why should they stick their neck out for somebody who may or may not be here, right? When they have to answer the real questions of why you had to do it. I always say, somebody asked me once, what did Kun Thaksin do wrong, right? My answer has always been very clear. Right? He screwed up Thailand's bureaucratic system. It's actually a very good system. Prior. You're coughing now. Should I be quiet now? Right? We don't have bad bureaucrats. We used to have bureaucrats based upon people, when they graduated out of colleges and university, would want to go work for the Ministry of Finance, would want to go to work for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Those are really, really, really jobs that Thai people want. Politicians have gone in and pretty much screwed up that whole system. So nobody wants to work there anymore, right? So I don't blame the bureaucrat system. They're just not getting good people. We used to get people graduated from Jula, Thammasat, all the foreign universities. Their first job would be, gee, let's go work for Ministry of Finance. Let's go work for Ministry of Health. Let's go work for Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Now they'd rather sell stuff on the internet. So you can't really blame. It's a quality of the people inside the bureaucrats. I don't blame CP, I don't blame Chang. Look, of course they're gonna protect their interests, right? And they do hire a lot of people, right? Now, do they have influence in this government? Yes. Do they have influence in the last government? Yes. Will they have influence in the next government? Yes. But that's business. And I don't see us being any different than any other country in the world, right? Are you telling me that major companies in Britain don't have a say in what Theresa May does?
Why would they bother?
So again, I think you have to put Thailand in a perspective, and I think Kunotin brings up a very, very good point, right? One of the dividends that I see, and a lot of people say, why, you know, a lot of people think actually I'm against this car. I'm a fair guy. If it's bad, it's bad. If it's good, it's good, right? One of the dividends I see is at least now we have some clear set of rules. There are some clear set of rules, right? And our rules may not be like America. Our rules may not be like Paris. Our rules may not be like England. But there are rules, right? And if you understand how to drive within this road, this rule, right, you're going to be fine. As Kun Anutin said, no one from the government has told me to stop eating, you know, what do you say? Stop eating Caesar salad, right? No one actually said that to me, right? Now, obviously, you know, being the foreign press, I understand there seems to be a lot of, how do you call it, you know, pressure. People are being arrested left and right. 112 is always there. Well, you know, I'll tell you something about 112. You don't want to get arrested on 112, don't say shit. Okay, so you're saying, well, a free country has the right to say shit. Guys, even the First Amendment of the United States of America, the First Amendment is the freedom of speech. You cannot go into a theater and yell fire. So if you're telling me, you know, that we should be free to speak our mind, even America doesn't allow you to speak your mind. There are rules, right? There are entities here which we hold dear to our culture. You know, I actually went on Facebook yesterday and talked about the Prime Minister saying this thing about the twerking dancer. You guys may read about this. Kun Lam Yai, right? You know, Hai Tong Kam. Right? Is that her name? Hai? Oh. A lot of people say to me, why did I support the Prime Minister on this? Right? Why did I support the Prime Minister on this? You know why? Because I don't think America agrees with what Miley Cyrus is doing. So Thai shouldn't. You have certain freedoms within a scope of a country's culture, within a scope of what a country holds dear, right? Freedom of speech. You know, if you look at America, right, the pornography rule, it's what's right for that community. You can't just do stuff outside of that community. And that's the United States of America, the land of the free, the home of the brave, land of the free, right? And you still have rules. So with that in mind, right, that would be where I stop. I think that those were some dividends. Politicians are going to be smarter and better in picking their candidates. Kunotin said there are rules. You can't be populist. So no more free rice for a while, anyway, right? And within regard to the big companies, you know, it is what it is. But I don't think it's the bureaucrat or the big companies' problems per se, that's stopping the country. It's an overall bigger picture of that. So I hope that answers your question, Jonathan.
Right, let's speed things up a little bit. Question, identify yourself.
Michael Mackey, freelance. Just a quick question. You seemed all to agree that Section 44 has some uses and that it's a good thing it's been used. Some people even going as far as to say it wasn't used enough, but you all then agreed it had only been used on infrastructure. Are there any other fields within the economy where you think it could be used to profit? Thinking particularly of laws or legislation that you think should be repealed in order to support business?
Actually, there's a lot, and I'll mention a few. Actually, I'm not sure you recall my phrase. I intentionally quote that phrase because I knew Jonathan Head was going to ask that kind of question. And thank you, Kun Tom, for amplifying the answer already, that there are, each country have their own cultural charms and challenges in ways of doing things. To answer your question, I think actually Article 44, I mentioned, touch upon that, the ownerships, the protectionism. There are areas that we need faster, better technology transfers. And you need, you know, again, there are a set of rules, but I think foreign investors, corporate, multinational corporations, are happy to play within the rule as long as they know what the rules are. So as I mentioned about the ownership from the majority shareholders, from the foreign investors, there are industries that you need foreigners to come and own a stake. Otherwise, why would they have interest to bring a more advanced platform abroad? I pointed out crowdfunding as an example, but there are other in the fintech or in the new technology, digital economy space. Why would they have interest if they were to own just a minority stake in Thailand? I think the rules, the legislation within the พรบโรงร่วมทุนต่างด้าว is basically the foreign ownership, within the businesses. It needs to be opened up. The protectionism within the key industry that Thailand needs the human resources to improve needs to be opened up. I'm talking about education. The most important thing that this government needs to do and can reform that I mentioned. Civil servants, Kun Thomas touched upon now today. In the old days, civil servant was being seen as the profession that is dear and a good thing to enter, prestigious. Now today, nobody wants to be a civil servant. Hardly anyone wants to be politicians. Hardly anyone wants to be teachers. 3 of the key professions that we need the most, and nobody wants to do those jobs. And yet, some of the good foreigners actually, funny enough, want to open up businesses here and do some of the stuff, especially I give you the academics angle. Carnegie Mellon just signed a deal to enter into Thailand. And there are more foreign universities that want to have curriculum lackluster, which used to be owned by one of the departments within the Ministry of Education that clearly have some form of control or cartels that they want to protect the curriculums. The Thai national curriculums needs a big reform. And if Article 44, if we have to use one straight away today, I'm not going to go as far as what one of the ex-Prime Minister of Thailand used to say, to abolish the whole Ministry of Education to solve the education problem. But if you were to use one Article 44 section today, it would be good to improve the actual works, the curriculum. Because if you don't get the curriculum right, you don't get the quality of the teacher right, then how on earth would you have the chance or the hope to compete in the next 15 to 20 years with the rise of Vietnam and the aspirations of other countries around us? So for me, that would be the answer.
Right. Identify yourself.
Chat Sethian Thai, high school student.
What student?
I'm just a high school student, just
Wow.
graduated. So.
Are you Thai?
Khap.
I'm impressed. No, I am a high school student from Thailand. That's good. What school do you go to?
Shrewsbury International School.
What school?
Shrewsbury International School.
Yeah, you beat my kid in basketball.
What's your kid's school?
ISB.
Ah.
All right, question, come on.
This is to all 3 of you. You've mentioned how the government's, the current regime, sort of their decisiveness with regards to infrastructure and certain spending matters have been revolutionary. Maybe this is aimed at Kun Anutin in particular. How will, with elections eventually coming up, how will politicians adapt to that legacy? How will they be able to, or how should they be able to compare with the with the speed at which a military unelected government managed to do so? Because from previous times we've seen various initiatives shot down in parliamentary debate. How is that going to change?
Simple question. Get the one who is intelligent to do the job. Thailand, the real figures have been bad. Remember the 111 executive members of Thai Rak Thai Party were banned from involving in politics for 5 years. And later came another 109. How many MPs in the House in those days? 350. So you took away 2/3 of people who were to run the country. So that's why I say we paid big penalty from a belief of people who staged the coup, saying that politicians are bad, but who eventually end up running the country after election was held. Not Tom Krasopon, not Prin Panishapak, as president of CLSA Thailand. It has to be politicians that came from the people through the party. And then it's like we are all running the corporates, whereas the successful CEO and his team were on probation, were on detention. So who would run? Then second row, third row. That's why you heard a lot about word nominees, right? Nominees government, nominees minister. Nominee is always a nominee. They are not the player. So I hope that comes the next election, everybody has been free of any ban. So the real, I involved personally in the past two governments that the real players could not get involved. Even though we were able to control things to a certain extent, but once you crown someone, they always believe that they are really crowned. And worse than that, they wanted to compete. They did not think that they just came in on as an ad hoc. Once you were called excellency, ministers, once you have motorcade, you seem like, you were the real one. We used to have a joke that once, before we crowned them, they came to see you every 6 o'clock in the morning. Promised loyalty, allegiance, that I would do everything in accordance with the policy. 1 week passed, they said I could only come every other day because my schedule wouldn't allow me. 2 weeks passed, they don't show up no more. The third week we called them, the guy who answered his phone would be, my name is Lieutenant blah blah blah, I'm the attaché to His Excellency Mr. Minister of whatever. So Thailand paid big price from that, from just saying that you can no longer trust politicians. In order to have that become very effective, if you said things like that, then politicians can no longer run the country. The word politician is occupation, it's not title. Actually, all cabinet members right now, from General Prayuth to every minister, is already politician, because there is no occupation as prime minister. When you fill in passport, immigration form, you can't say yourself occupation prime minister. That means you flunk English. You have to put in as politician. So it is it is a profession. Good or bad depends on each individual. So Thailand after election, keep your finger crossed, pray that the real guys is coming in. He should have a better sense of responsibility than the fake guys. He should realize that things that they have done in the past has big stigma on the forehead. So we just do it opposite to what we used to do, and only aim for national interest. That would be enough to bring Thailand forward. And I'm hopeful.
You want a quick follow-on?
Yes, please, if I may. You've mentioned sort of previous big names or key players perhaps returning, but how does that solve the very fundamental issue that there's not much trust in political establishments anymore, whether it be here or globally, and instead oddly enough, the military seems to be a very popular alternative. How is that going to change? How do we change people from viewing the military as a very credible government? Given their track record, okay, it's spotted massively, but given their track record of achieving some things that took forever to achieve with a civilian government.
It's a nice small question.
Sorry.
Rome isn't built in one day. We have to make believe that Thailand, post-election, is another ball game. It will be the first elected government under the new reign of the country. There must be big change. The old-timers will automatically vanish because they have nothing new to sell. And the people who are running the political parties become more and more independent. I will dare ask you to come in and play, and dare offer you the good opportunity if your contribution is, if you meet what you have promised me as a youngsters, as a new generation. I could not sell my father anymore in politics. I cannot bring people who still believe in, you know, praying to the God, expecting that rain will come after rallying with the cats in the ceremony. That will no longer exist. You have to make believe that that has passed. Thai people, even though they live in remote area, they have access to Facebook, to lines, to information. And that's why military regime cannot penetrate to that. The poll has been stable as to which party will bring in how many seats in the parliament. So what I'm trying to campaign more and more is before, when the ring starts, okay? Now we're still in mourning period. We have to recognize that, and we have to respect that. Once the bell rings, you will see that you will have to tell me that don't only point finger at politicians. If in the past, if I asked Kun Tom or Kun Prin to enter politics to help me campaign the party, Kun Prin will say, I don't want to do it because I don't want to expose my assets. I don't want to report my assets. I'm not sure whether something will follow me home after my term. But now it is clear that if you don't commit sin, you won't get sin. You only need to become more conscious that the country needs new timers like you. If you only keep complaining, the politicians are bad, and you stay out of the ring, you don't get in, you only complain and complain. What you would do is, one day those politicians will become used to your complaint and will not feel anything. And since you have that expectation on us like this, being corrupted, being, you know, selfish, so be it. Because we don't exceed your expectation. We are under your expectation. So that's why Thailand has become things like this. But once the new faces enter into politics, and don't fall with personal interest, don't be full with the power that you're having at hand. It needs big transition, but at least it's better than nothing. People like Prince would never talk to me about politics 5 years ago. Nowadays, whenever we meet, we talk about, hey, what are we going to do next? You have a chance, let's do something together. So it has been some kind of transition, and be hopeful and support people who are doing good. Don't go out to vote for any party just because we are party A, we are party B. No matter who the candidate sent, no matter the policy is, you just go and vote for party A, regardless. Then the people who pay the price is yourself. It's not the candidates.
If we go back to the coup dividend, let's look back. You've spoken about a soft junta. You've spoken about the peace dividend, the stability dividend, the transition succession dividend. These things have all happened. But we're still talking about development, economic advancement, those issues which are missing. Now, you've spoken about politicians and military, and there's one group you've missed out, which is the technocrats, which are the people who built this economy 20, 30 years ago. Would we have done better with a non-military government after the coup and a technocrat solution, as we saw in 1991 after Suchinda, as we saw attempted and failed in 2006? Would that have taken Thailand in a better place? You talk about the incompetence of the PR machine. Absolutely right. They don't talk to the foreign media properly for a start. But would each of you, do you have a view on that, or do you think it's just too simplistic? Do you think the technocrats don't even exist anymore?
So if I understand your question correctly, would we have been better off to not have a coup, or is that
not to have a military government? The coups are given, but what follows? I mean, if you go back to the coups, you got Kriang Sak 77. He became prime minister, and that's the last time this happened.
Take it away. You start.
No, because I think that there are good and bad technocrats as there are good and bad militarymen or politicians. So I think sometimes in the days of, if I recall correctly, Kun Anand Banyarachun days as prime ministers, he was blessed with some excellent technocrats. In the days of General Prem Dinasulanon, the reason why we have Eastern Seaboard Part 1 was because he has excellent guys helping running, even during him, whether it's Dr. Sanok Unakoon, you remember Dr. Anat, a lot of good people from National Economic Social Development Boards. So in those days, we have very good civil servants and technocrats, both from the Bank of Thailand and at the NASDB that were called to actions. I think this day we also have good one, but perhaps maybe less so in certain areas that we used to have. But I think the technocrats has also come and helped drive parts of this, because I had this debate all the time and discussion with Gunanutin about sometimes technocrats are stuck in certain ways of doing things, or the minds are always taking orders and maybe not be there for visionaries or thinking about creative ways of leading a country in a strategic manner. But I think one dividend that we also mentioned is that technocrats are also leading us potentially back to the golden age of, we call it Yuk Chuang Chachawan, which is when Prem engineered this big growth phase. Because now we have this Eastern Economic Corridor, EEC. It will take time, as we say, this is going to be a big thing, but it will happen because both the policy from China, One Belt, One Road, and both the EEC, it will take time. But you saw how the Article 44 were used in a few directions. I mean, we need a hub like this, whether it's aviation hubs, whether it's going to be the eco car, electric vehicles, whether it's going to be the new space for logistic hubs for the e-commerce to prosper. It's already beginning to take shapes, but it will take time, and patience and perseverance will be needed along the way. But I think technocrats are the ones who engineer some of this. Some of them are in the government at the moment, some of them are not. But Dr. Kanit Sangsupan, give an example, the heads of the EEC, the Secretary General, he has also been technocrats all along, helping with NESDB from the first Eastern Seaboard project to now leading the EEC project right now. One of the double-edged sword of anti-corruption campaigns is often the slowness of the civil servants to do anything, because they're scared that they do something and then they get prosecuted and go to jail. They already get low pay salary, not as high salary as in the private sector. So to be working in that, they're as smart as some people in the private sector, some even smarter. Dr. Niti Tan Prapat, for example, to name one guy who heads up the the SOE office, state-owned enterprise office at the Ministry of Finance, and he dares to sign some papers that would allow, for example, the blue line extension of the contracts that may deem to be benefit one certain party that already have that blue line. But it makes sense to have that continuation on the blue line circle to go to that company, for example. It makes sense also to speed up the PPP, public-private partnership. That's also pretty daring to have that first kind of shape to happen. So there are challenges, and the good thing and bad thing about having technocrat runnings. This kind of thing, there are continuity. But as I mentioned earlier, what I'm more worried about is the technocrats to come in the future, because there are fewer good people going into the technocrats.
Give me 1 minute on this. If the policymaker just follow and believe in the late King's philosophy, I'm speaking from my own heart. I have no hidden agenda. I'm not trying to say something nice, because there might be some intelligence staff, officials here. But the sufficient economy will prevail, which means know yourself. Thailand is not England. Thailand is not United States. Thailand is not Japan. So most of the policymakers which came into the office are trying to, they lack of their own confidence. They have to think about some things with technologies, with advancement. They try to talk about high-speed trains. They talk about, I even said the AEC, East-West Corridor, EEC. Of course, you can dream of that and believe that if you set up the right foundation, it will lead to that end. But not tomorrow, not today. Talk about Thailand 4.0, in which it's difficult enough to get to 0.4, like Kun Prin has mentioned. Look at ourselves first. Thailand emerging from coups, emerging from partisans. How it's like we're walking out from the intensive care unit and run. You need to gradually recover yourself, and then from there on, start speeding. What Thailand will be if the elected government comes in, and if they know the business. Of course, Thailand will eventually have a high-speed train. But if I were part of the decision-making, I said, yes, but not now. High-speed trains mean 3 trillion baht expenditures, which 85% of it must be imported. What Thailand will get when we already have multiple budget airlines? We have, there are alternative modes of transportations before thinking about investing such an enormous amount of money, which we are not ready. Putting ourselves into indebtedness for another 3 trillion right after coming out from chaotic situation. What would we get? Another indebtedness on each shoulders of each individual. Have you asked Thai people whether they need it? Have you asked people in Surin, in Nong Khai, which between high-speed trains and a road without U-turn, motorways, or a better transportation to improve, to improve the time that they need to spend to come into a big town, Thai people, I think 95% of them will give you an answer. I still prefer driving my own pickup truck where I could, put 500 kilos of crops and then some other stuff coming into outskirts of Thailand. We have the area to exchange trade, and then picking up things from Bangkok and sell it at home. It's two ways economies. The problem now is it takes too long. That's why it discourages these people to spend that big effort. Would these people want to travel in high-speed train? What is it good for Thailand? This is the thing that I fight to death, that we need it as priority. And Chiang Mai, Bangkok, no matter how fast you can get, we don't get a super high-speed train. Actually, it's only mid-speed train. They just don't call it mid-speed train. It's not 300 kilometers an hour. It's about 200 and 180. Still takes 4.5 hours to get yourself to Chiang Mai.
Okay,
And
we've run for nearly 2 hours, so we need to wrap it up. But before we go, we have 14 months probably to run, a bit longer to an election. So say the
I'm trying to say,
quarter.
Know yourself. Know your capacity, know your capability, and then we'll be able to tackle.
Okay, but when you have a military government which has Article 44 and other powers, it can do things immediately and finally in a way that political parties can't do. As I say, we've got 16 months, say, to go. Can each one of you give me one thing that could be done in that period that would be in the national interest that's simple? Reforming education is a non-starter. You're not going to do that in that period. But there are things that could be done. For example, lifting ownership rules, that kind of very simple stuff. What would you recommend? Just 1 point each. Prin. You have lots of them.
I think I gave lots already, but as I say, I know. Actually, Article 44 was used for the education to bring foreign university to Thailand, but I actually mentioned education because for us to stand hope of long-term competitiveness for the country, you still need to use with a human capital, which means that the improvement of the national curriculum is where I still would prioritize, meaning that from the childhood learning, the early learnings, to the university upward. So for me, is to use that Article 44 to reform the curriculum.
Kuntom.
Two things. I guess the first thing is allow foreign media to wear flak jackets. That could be something they could do pretty quickly.
That's very kind of you.
The reality is, as I said, Prayuth had all the power in the world. But the dividend that he didn't do was he used that power wisely. Right? He had the goodwill. He had the ability to do all of the things you said. Yes, I would agree. I think foreign land ownership would have been a big economic boost to our country. Never seen a 747 pick up an entire house and flown it back to Japan. Would have been nice, right? Visa rules. Why do foreigners have to go to the embassy or leave to Cambodia every 3 months? Never got that thing either, right? I like having you guys here. You guys like to spend money, right? I think those are rules that can be changed. But in reality, it's too late now. Clock is ticking. Tick-tock, tick-tock, he's on the clock. Prayuth is not there to be on the offense anymore. What he needs to do at this juncture is maintain his defensive position. He won't have a lot of ability to use Article 44 much after the Constitution has been ratified. What he needs to do, and again, this is what people need to understand when a lot of you say that there won't be elections. He needs to quickly as possible get to elections. Then that allows him to become a true politician, stay on board as the country's new chairman of the board, get a new nice prime minister who understands what it means to be a CEO, and then we run the country together. If that happens, then I think we're going to move forward. I want to compliment one thing. That young man, is he still here? Did you go back because you have school tomorrow? Why is your parents letting you out so late, by the way? Right. Very good. Look, I'm very impressed. And I'm very impressed that the Foreign Correspondents Club allow a young man like this to come in and ask that kind of question. You want to fix things? As Kunutin said, stop bitching, start getting yourself involved. Get your friends involved. We need you. I'm too old, man. Right? I'm too old. But it doesn't mean that I can't be pushed, incentivized, woken up by voices like yours.
We same age.
Right? So I'm impressed. Jonathan Head just sent me a little SMS. He's on his way to London. He says, thank you for making Thailand not look so serious.
Okay, Kunat Anutin, before you come back as an elected politician, what would you like this government to have got done? One thing.
I think Tom has already answered for me. Make sure that you stay with the promise. Make sure that you have managed to at least get the differences among many parties to share one own target, which is Thailand benefit. Apart from that, I think for the leader now to exercise the Article 44 as fluent as he used to do before, I think it might be untimed for him, because Article 44 has given one individual to have superpower, but we are now already having the new charters in effect. So I think you would be able to notice that he tries to limit that power, which is a very good spirit of him. And all he needs to do now is to make sure that, well, if he could slow down and less often say that politicians are bad, this would really do a lot good for the country.
Okay, that's one solid recommendation. So on that note, I'd like to thank Kunanutin, Tom and Prim.
You have a pretty lady wanting to answer questions.
What?
Excuse me, can I ask the
Where
last
were you
question?
hiding? Where were you hiding?
Yeah, I'm a little bit short, so
Okay.
yeah.
I've been caught out.
Let me just get this. Okay. So this question to Kun Anutin. The new election gives 250-member military-appointed Senate to hold the elected lower house in check. They will need only 126 out of 500 lower house MP to gather a simple majority and win the key votes. That includes the selection of the prime minister after the election. So when you mention that you are hopeful that after election we will have the better people to run the government, do you mean the people who got selected or approved by the military? Because it's likely to be in that way, and that makes me hopeless.
So, who are you?
I'm Kasama Nanakara.
But you're
I'm
just yourself?
me, yes.
Fine, there's no problem with that.
Just make up 3 letters. Like, I'm from EFF.
No.
It doesn't matter. There's so many fake medias out there, right?
Okay, so anyway, your question is who is going to choose the next prime minister, I believe. So,
Your answer.
Well, don't forget on one thing, that 250 senators could only bring you to the prime minister chair. But after that, they are not part of your support at all. Once you get to the prime minister chair using that 250 senators, that means you, in the system, they have already run out of choices. This comes at the 3rd tier. Well, I will feel very empathy to that prime minister if he has to use that 250 non-MPs votes to get himself up there, because I'm confident that he cannot run. That means you just mentioned he only needs 126 votes from the lower house. And the lower house of 126 cannot govern the government, you know.
So it doesn't work. It's unstable.
It should. I cannot say between you and me. I never believed that Thailand will ever go that far as a politician myself. How could we stand being in the house of 500 MPs and none of it, neither one of it, namely 500 MPs elected by people of Thailand, is qualified to be the leader of the country. I dare betting that it will never go that far, because if it goes that far, that prime minister who is outsider and supposedly he doesn't have any real backing from the
political parties.
MPs
Yeah.
or political parties. How could you stand solo on that tower and not be brought down? Yeah. He will become even more than a lame duck. And the only thing that without, and in that day we believe that there is no longer Article 44. So we are even. So that is my humble answer.
And of course the great example of what you're describing is May 1992, when Suchinda put himself on top of political parties that were elected and ripped him apart in 1 month.
Exactly.
Sir, different though. Suchinda was in even a better position because he had that Samakhi Tham party, if you ever remember.
Yeah, which they created. Yeah.
Nowadays, I don't think that
there is no military. There's no military party.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So look, we've run a huge amount of time. It's been a very interesting evening. It's very refreshing to hear Thais speaking about their own country in such a frank manner. So I'd like to thank Kunanutin, Tom and Prin, and invite you back. Maybe we'll have a look at the end of next year and have another look at the coup dividend and compare notes. Thank you very much.
Don't forget to go to Four Seasons, though. Four Seasons. Thank you.